The news tonight, a former Fox News reporter is ready to tell Congress about the network's role in allegations that it tried to bury a story that links Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels during the campaign. Now, we broke this exclusive last night on The Beat, and today you can see it's making many other headlines. The House Oversight Committee telling us exclusively last night they would request documents relating to, quote, extramarital affairs and payments with or by Trump and any, quote, potential campaign finance violation, as well as an appearance, this is all brand new, for a transcribed interview with that ex-reporter. So this request went to Fox News reporter Diana Falzone and her attorney. She reportedly had the Stormy Daniels story or was working on it before the election and is now asking one simple thing: let her out of the NDA to speak about it. Falzone's lawyer telling us the client will comply with Congress's request and that it itself overrides Fox News' NDA. Do you view this, even before it ever gets to a subpoena level, this request itself as something that you can comply with, regardless of Fox News asking for your client's silence?
Yes. Anybody out there, anybody in your audience who has an NDA must know that the law requires that you be allowed to participate in any government investigation, and no NDA can stop that.
Joining me now is New York Times investigative reporter Megan Twohey, who's been all over these stories, and former Slate editor-in-chief Jacob Weisberg, who I mentioned earlier in the show, had the original details about the Stormy Daniels story basically before anyone. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Happy to be here.
I'll start with probably the easiest question. As a reporter, would you be interested in hearing the rest of what this ex-Fox News reporter has to say, or should she stay locked up under this NDA?
Well, first of all, I don't think we need congressional hearings to prove that Fox News is a propaganda network and state television.
Well, that's your opinion, Jacob.
Yeah. I think they would have suppressed the Stormy Daniels story, but I seriously doubt they had it in a usable form. And I know that because I was pursuing the story, and I remember Stormy Daniels mentioning to me that Diana Falzone was one of the other reporters she was talking to, but she decided to take the money from Trump instead of going public. And at that point, it was clear not only was she not going to participate in the story, she was going to deny it, her lawyer was going to deny it, and at least for me reporting on it, the evidence without her backing it up, with her denying it, wasn't sufficient. So I think Fox's motives could be terrible, but Diana Falzone still likely did not have it in a journalistically defensible form.
Right. I think that's an important detail and nuance you're referring to, which is both things could be true. There could be undue pressure or motivations, and there also could be a story that was not in the position to run, and a person who was, as you say, alternating between talking to reporters and then taking money to not talk to reporters. On the details, I want to get a little more of the reporting out, and then Megan, have you respond. Falzone's lawyer, though, also makes the point that Fox, who we reached out to for comment, and as I've said every time we report this story, they deny that this was about anything other than the story not being in reportable fashion, and many have pointed out that's what other journalists, including yourself during that period, ultimately determined. But this lawyer is telling us that that denial itself is misleading, that the person that Fox had, a former employee who makes this denial, is wrong. Take a look.
We think that we will be able to show that Ken LaCorte is a liar.
Do you have material about him specifically, if you're making that allegation?
For one thing, he didn't stop the story, and that's going to be evident.
You're saying that whole narrative that he wrote, that he was the one personally intervening itself, that he wasn't even involved in overseeing that story?
Yes.
Was it someone more senior than him?
Yes.
Was it someone famous?
We'll let Congress decide whether or not to hold a hearing in public.
So I think it's interesting to juxtapose the claim that Murdoch owned Fox had an interest and even executed suppressing this damaging story about Trump in 2016, while also recognizing, on the other hand, that it was Fox-owned Wall Street Journal that actually broke the story of one of the other catch and kill operation that happened during 2016. Before the election, the Wall Street Journal was the first people to report that Karen McDougal had been silenced through a catch and kill operation with the National Enquirer. And the Wall Street Journal actually led much of the reporting on these efforts to silence these two women who had these damaging stories about Trump.
Which means what?
Well, I just think that it raises questions. If you're going to say on the one hand, I mean, if there's a claim that sort of Murdoch-owned Fox was working to sort of silence the story.
The rebuttal to that is that Sean Hannity and Roger Ailes, who was important running Fox at the time, who went on to literally advise Donald Trump on the debates, that part of the company seems to have more political sway than the Journal. In other words, I think that's an interesting argument you raised, but I don't think it's that helpful. It just reminds us the difference between Sean Hannity and the Wall Street Journal.
Well, I mean, it depends on. It'll be interesting to see who they're going to point the finger at when she actually shares her information with Congress.
Well, I would argue. Let me push you a little more, since we're all journalists pushing each other. They're pointing the finger at Ken LaCourt, and that's why I pressed her on, can you prove that? Because they're saying there's a false cover story.
Well, they're saying it goes higher.
Yeah.
So the question is, how high does it go? And if I remember correctly, I think the Fox story even suggested it may have gone as high as Murdoch. So, I mean, this is all. That's why I make the Murdoch connection to the Wall Street Journal, which did all of this groundbreaking reporting on these issues and actually helped the silencing of this women come to light.
I guess this segment is about Fox News, not the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, well, I think that there's... well, it's also about the efforts of this former Fox reporter to basically break her silence and come forward with more information.
I mean, my view, Jacob, is either they have it or they don't, right? I mean, if they can't prove this and they're just making wild allegations about Mr. LaCourt or others, and I pressed on that, then it kind of goes away. If they could go to Congress and prove that at a high level, Fox, not the Journal, was doing something wrong that led to Michael Cohen's now confessed crime, that could be a story.
Well, everybody wants to simplify the story about Fox and Murdoch and say they're just in Trump's camp, but it's much more complicated than that. They're a, in my opinion, journalistically dishonest organization that nonetheless employs honest journalists. And Megyn's point about the Journal, owned by Murdoch, is an honest journalistic organization that has maintained its integrity despite being owned by this guy who has his own motives of sucking up to Trump and sucking up to power. But, you know, the motives are, Murdoch's motives are mixed. Fox's business is complicated. You get Hannity doing nothing resembling journalism, but you have, you know, Chris Wallace and Bret Baier and other people there doing something that is journalism and trying to do it. So it's a complicated picture.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the comparison. Okay, let's put the Wall Street Journal aside. Let's focus on the comparison of Fox having elements of this story in 2016 before the presidential election, Slate having many of the same elements of this story at the exact same time, and neither of them published this story. I mean,
I hate to be a lawyer about it, but that distinction doesn't take you very far because Slate is not being credibly accused with an NDA hanging over an employee of emails, facts, and evidence that would put forward the wrong reason. So, you know, everyone goes to work in the morning. If one person goes to work and is accused of committing a crime and the other person didn't, I don't think Slate helps that much. You're here because you were in the middle of it, but you're not accused of what she's accused of.
Correspondent, even though I've moved on to the podcasting business.
Final thought.
No, I think that you also have to recognize anybody who has worked on stories in which women have been silenced by these secret settlements or NDAs know that the moment that your subject has been silenced, it is really hard to get to publication with them.
Right, and I think that's a fair point that goes to why there's a larger context. We will see, and we've been pressing for the details, whether they have the evidence to prove misconduct or not. If not, it's one more story that didn't go to press. Megyn Twohey and Jacob Weisberg, thanks to both of you for being here. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.